Hi everybody, I hope you're doing well and your studies are going smoothly. Welcome back. We're going to crack on with some social influence revision. It's the last subtopic in that unit today, and we're going to look at social change processes. Here are some exam style questions that you can have a go at. What I would suggest you do is in a second you pause the video. You try, it depends how much time you've got set aside, but if you've got half an hour, you could pick a couple of short ones and maybe try the essay, or just select whatever works for you. But try to give yourself some sense of time pressure so that you practice recalling in a situation that's similar to the exam. When you've had a go, come back, play the video, and I'll talk through how I would tackle and break down each of these. So, here's your chance to pause. Okay, right, so you're back with me. Command word for the first one is identify. We want two stages of social change. Now, social change is split into minority processes, which is what you might think of more readily when you think of how society changes. You might think of like the suffragettes and things like that. But also, it's worth bearing in mind that there are times where social change is possible through majority influence processes or conformity processes. So we'll touch on that later on. But this one says minority. So we want two stages. Identify just means name or state. So something like, let's just go for some of the early ones. So drawing attention to the issue, that's one step. And consistency of position is another step. That's all you need. Okay, explain what is meant by social change. So this is where you're going to say probably something along the lines of social change refers to where the prevailing attitude in a society or a group changes or is influenced by a majority or minority. You could give an example. So that would be maybe attitudes to women's vote. You could give an example of, the civil rights movement, or whatever it might be. More recently, in terms of gay rights and marriage and things like that, would be absolutely fine. Okay. The third one is only a 2-marker. We want to explain, so we want to show some knowledge, and this time it's about majority. So this is where actually most people in a group are already doing the right thing. But what you're trying to do here is make the people that aren't doing that aware that most people are already doing it. And then they conform through things like normative influence. Yeah? So in terms of answering this question, perhaps something like social change can occur through majority influence processes by making the minority aware of the actual social norm for a behaviour. Those that are unaware might have what we call a misperception. So adverts or campaigns can be used to correct that misperception. And that's plenty for 2 marks. Okay, we now have some application, and we want minority influence, and we want to link to attitudes to vaping. Okay, so since it's minority, we're going to go down the route of the whole kind of drawing attention and consistency and snowball and all of that. So it's only 3 marks, maybe something like, firstly, a minority group of campaigners could draw attention to the issue through some adverts and, campaigns. Perhaps they would focus on maybe the long-term impacts or unknown kind of health issues that might be associated with vaping. There's some application. They would maintain this view over time until a snowball effect occurs, whereby more and more people who have converted to the anti-vaping attitude come on board, and that view spreads across society until it becomes the majority position to not approve of vaping. Now there is more to say, but it is only 3 marks, and some of that will be application, so that's plenty. Okay, this time we want majority, and we want to apply it to fitness behaviour. Okay, so firstly, we're going to identify a minority group that are not behaving in line with the actual norm in society. Let's say we find a group or a community or whatever where the norm is currently that, I don't know, they go to the gym or they go for a walk once a week or whatever it might be. So you'd identify a minority where they're not doing that. And what you would do is address their misperception. So they might hold beliefs like, nobody really goes to the gym, or who actually bothers to go for a walk every week? Yeah, so you need to tackle that view, address that misperception using information campaigns, adverts, posters around the local area. Maybe you would do some surveys or get some existing data and create posters saying, like 72% of people walk for at least an hour a week, and you'd put that around the local area. That is going to address the misperception, and you will see some of those minority members conforming through majority influence, through normative influence, and improving or increasing their fitness behaviour. Okay, so the next one is 6 marks of application, and we're putting it all together here because it's quite open. It just says social change. So you could go down the route of minority influence and just get all 6 marks there. There's enough to say. Or you could bring in some of that majority as well and talk about doing a social norms intervention with like the posters and things. So let's say we just wanted to go down the minority route. As I said, there's enough to say. So we might break this down in terms of 3 knowledge marks, 3 application marks. We need to talk through the steps. I haven't talked through them all yet, so I'll just go through those in terms of knowledge and make some links as we go. So firstly, a minority group would draw attention to the issue, for example, by running campaigns on, and here's the application, the impact, the positive, maybe environmental impact of recycling. The next step is to maintain consistency of position. Here you could bring in some of your knowledge from minority influence and mention diachronic and synchronic consistency if you wanted to. So consistency across time and consistency within the minority group. Perhaps, and here's the application, this is by maintaining a series of posters and adverts and campaigns over a series of months or years. This consistency, this drawing attention, creates what we call cognitive conflict in the minds of the majority. It encourages them to listen to the message and think, do you know what, those guys have been saying this for a couple of years now, maybe there's something to this. Yeah? Cognitive conflict. Okay, if that's not quite got where the minority want to be, then we might use the augmentation principle. Now, to augment means to strengthen. So the augmentation principle is when a minority endures some kind of sacrifice in order to strengthen their argument, or a sacrifice that ends up strengthening their argument. So these minority members, these people that are wanting more recycling to happen, might well invest some of their own time and money into running campaigns or supporting communities, maybe, getting different equipment or bins, or getting areas set up in the community to support recycling, that sort of thing. They could, I suppose, kind of chain themselves to railings outside Parliament, this sort of thing, but some kind of action that kind of puts themselves out there, or puts themselves at some kind of risk, which encourages the majority to, again, listen and pay attention, and it strengthens their position. Everyone else is looking at them going, oh, well, they must be quite serious about this. Okay, eventually we will find a snowball effect. So as more and more people think more deeply about this issue and they come on board with the view of recycling, then this view will spread more and more across society as they then influence their family and their friends, and it snowballs and speeds up and spreads until it is the majority view. Now, that's probably enough in terms of knowledge and application, but some of you might have learned about a final step, which is called social cryptomnesia, which is where the change is in the past, and everybody's kind of forgotten about the struggle to get there, and everybody's kind of looking around going, oh yeah, I've always recycled. Yeah, well, I don't know why anybody wouldn't do that. Yeah, so we've all kind of forgotten about the issue in the first place, and everyone just does it. Okay, we then have some more kind of, it's application, discussion, kind of psychology in the economy kind of themes. So in terms of psychology in the economy, and I'll probably do another video about this at some point, but generally we're thinking about impact on things like the NHS or on businesses in terms of people being at work, paying taxes, being productive for their companies and things like that. So the application here is to healthy eating, and the most obvious thing that comes to mind for me is if we improve healthy eating, then this will have a positive impact on the NHS. So I would talk briefly about the fact that we're going to have fewer illnesses, we're going to have fewer people suffering with obesity and the other complications health-wise that come with that. And this is going to reduce the burden on the NHS, whose budgets, as you know, are already very tight. You could, it is 4 marks, you could then mention the fact that with less illness resulting from unhealthy eating and obesity, we're going to see less people taking time off work, so less absenteeism, which is where you are not in work, which is meaning that we're going to save money for businesses. People are going to be at work producing products, delivering goods and services, whatever it might be, so increasing productivity in the economy. Okay, so I've gone down the route of NHS with a little bit of businesses there as well. But that's the kind of thing you're talking about if you see economic implications. Okay, for 4 marks, we want to evaluate the role of majority influence. I'd probably do either a kind of Peel-style paragraph and then counter-argue for 4 marks, or I'd just do 2 kind of point, explain, conclude paragraphs. A couple of ideas then, and that will roll into the 16 marker we've got next. So there is research support for the role of majority influence, so this is a strength. You could talk about, I'm sure a lot of you will have looked at the Most of Us Don't Drink and Drive study by Linkenbach and Perkins. So they went to Montana State University or some colleges or something in Montana and delivered messages, posters, adverts, campaigns on drink driving, because most people actually didn't do it. But they found that there was a perception among students that actually a lot of people did, and that was sort of justifying them doing it. So they corrected that misperception, and they found that self-reported drink driving did significantly decrease. So this demonstrates research support, it demonstrates credibility for the role of majority influence processes in social change. The counterpoint, if you're going down that route, might be actually this hasn't been replicated by other psychologists. So there was another study that was done by De Jong et al. And they looked at, again, it was a kind of university or college campus kind of study. They looked at different campuses. And they did a very similar kind of thing on alcohol. And they found actually that people didn't decrease in terms of their how much they were drinking. So that could be 4 marks in terms of you've got a strength and then you've counter-argued. And you might finish that off if that's one paragraph by saying, therefore, maybe there's only partial support for the role of majority influence. And that would be fun. If you didn't have that counterpoint, you could have another little paragraph and maybe talk about something called the boomerang effect, which is where majority influence, yes, it does have a role to play, but it can also have negative implications. So think about it. For those people that are already doing the right thing, if they then see all these posters saying, oh, 64% of people do this, some of them might actually go, oh, do you know what? There's quite a lot of people that aren't doing this. Yeah, so why am I bothering to put myself out? And actually you see that people that were doing the right thing start to do the wrong thing. Yeah, so that could be another evaluation point. Talking about the negative implications of social norms intervention. Yeah, so that was the boomerang effect. Okay, the last one for 16 marks, we want to outline and evaluate the role of social influence processes. So this could be majority and minority. That's probably the route I'd go down. I think on the day, under time pressure, if I was sitting the exam, I might actually run out of things to say if I did all of that on minority. So I'd be tempted to dip into majority as well, but you don't have to necessarily. I've already talked through majority. I've given you a couple of evaluation points. So what else could we say about minority? You could say that one strength is real-world application, and talk about how we have got examples such as the suffragettes and the civil rights movement. You could talk about Gandhi's Salt March, if you're aware of that one, and talk about how our understanding of minority influence therefore maybe has external validity because we can see it happening in the real world. So that could be a strength. You could also talk about how there is more kind of lab-based research to support some of these ideas, and you could draw on your knowledge of minority influence as in kind of the previous lesson or in my previous video, and talk about studies like Moscovici or Nemeth and Brillmeyer to support those theories. And that might work quite nicely in conjunction with a kind of real-world application paragraph. You could also talk about how one of the problems for minority influence is that people might not actually pay attention to the message because they're more concerned about being perceived as deviant. To be labelled as a minority has, for some people, kind of negative connotations, and some people don't want to be, if I use the example of, recycling behaviour, some people in the majority won't pay attention to the message or change their behaviour simply because they don't want to be labelled as, for example, a tree hugger or something like that. So you have to think, minorities have to think very carefully about how they kind of market themselves and how they encourage identification, to kind of link into something from social learning theory, with majority members. So trying to explain that actually, we are people the same as you, we live in your area, we're very much like you, we just feel very strongly about this and this is why. And try and encourage, as I said, the identification process. And all of this means that actually, with the best will in the world, some minorities are just not very influential. They don't, in reality, hold power. That's why they're the minority. And it's very difficult for them to get the majority to really pay attention to the message, as opposed to, this is just a deviant group of troublemakers, and I don't want to have anything to do with them. Yeah, some people are very rigid in their beliefs. Okay, so I've talked through a lot of different ideas there. It's up to you how you break that down. As I said, I'd probably do the majority of the response on minority, and then bring in a bit of majority influence. So I'd probably start by talking about your steps, so your attention, conflict, consistency, augmentation, all of that. Do a couple of discussion paragraphs, like I've talked through. Then possibly move into a short paragraph on the knowledge of social norms intervention, talking about misperceptions and correcting them. And then have a discussion paragraph or two on that. That's what I would do. You don't have to break it down like that. Just my thoughts. Okay, so whatever you've done, hopefully as you've been listening to me, you've been reflecting in terms of analysing your raw performance, what was correct, what wasn't, but also thinking about things like how difficult was it? Did you have to have a cheeky look in the textbook or at your notes or anything like that? And ultimately, what are you going to do next? Yeah, you're not done. This can feed back into more revision or more focused revision if there were one or two parts that you struggled with, or it might be more general. So maybe you didn't try the essay this time. So reflect on why was that? Is it because you weren't comfortable with the topic, or was it because maybe you're resisting that more extended writing? So try to force yourself to do something about that. This brings us to the end. Thanks very much if you're still with me. Do ask a question in the comments section and I'll get back to you. Thanks very much. Good luck. Keep going, guys. I'll see you in another video. Bish bash bosh.